So, good morning, everyone. I think we can start now. Welcome and thank you for joining this webinar today. I'm Arnaud Vernus. I'm an EPOCH practice officer at Fianza, and it's today webinar number 4, and it's titled Lifting the Veil on Finland. The webinar is being recorded right now, so you can turn off your camera if you don't want to be in it. And it will last 1 hour and a half. First, I wanted to say a few words about EPOCH practice. E-practice is projected by Fianza, selected by the European Commission for the workstream on mutual learning and capacity building inside EPOCH, the European Platform on Combating Homelessness. We are funded for 2 years and we have started developing activities since January 2024, including study visit, a community of practice with the member state representatives, training sessions, and also a series of webinars. The first one was on US data on homelessness with Benny Kulhane. The second one was on voting rights for homeless people. The third one was on rural homelessness with examples from Belgium and England. And all those webinars can be found on our YouTube channel. So today it's number 4, I said. It's called Lifting the Veil on Finland, and we will discuss the state of public policies to combat homelessness in Finland. Finland has made remarkable progress on tackling homelessness thanks to a large-scale implementation of housing first. But our discussion today is going to be about the successes of these policies, but also and mainly about the limitation and the challenges the Finnish approach is facing. With this webinar, I want to offer insights to help shape effective strategies for combating homelessness in other EU countries. Just a few words about the structure of this webinar. The first part is going to be what we call the thought-provoking introduction. It will be presented by Juha Kärkinen. He is a former CEO at the Y Foundation and currently professor of practice in the Faculty of Social Sciences at the University of Tampere in Finland. Then the second part is going to be a panel discussion with high-profile experts from Finland. And this panel will reflect on the successes and the challenges that Finland is facing in terms of homelessness policies. And we will ask the experts what the EU member state can learn from the Finnish example as well. This discussion will be moderated by Ruth Owen, the Deputy Director in Fianza. And then to conclude this webinar, we'll have a Q&A section at the end of the webinar for about half an hour. And you can ask your questions in the chat section at the bottom of the screen, or you can also ask them live at the end of the webinar. Thank you for listening. I think we can start now. Juha, the floor is yours if you want to share your slides.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Good morning, noon, afternoon, depending on where you are. And I will try to share my slides. Do you see them now? Can you see the slides?
No.
Sorry, we do not know.
Okay.
Do you want me to do it?
It looks like it would be better because I try once more. Yes, it requires some effort, but I will start very soon. The moment. Okay, it's better if you are not share the slides. So
no worries, you can do it.
So if you will open the first slide,
Yep.
not the title slide, but the next one. Yes.
That one?
Yes, this one. So can you put it in the presentation mode?
Of course. .
Yes, okay. And now you see this slide which shows the longer history of the homelessness development in Finland. This has been made by our great colleague Raine Helsku, I hope from Y Foundation. And as you can see, also during this century, the peak in homelessness was around 2012, and after that, homelessness has decreased continuously. And the decrease has been over 50% of the total amount of people in homelessness. And with long-term homelessness, it has been even bigger, 65%. And as you may know, 2/3 of homeless people in our statistics are people living temporarily with friends and relatives. And we still have I would say, the core group of homelessness, which is around 800 people in shelters, temporary accommodation, and also sleeping out in some cases. The next slide, please. Here is a list of the, I would say, the usual suspects, the explanations why this policy in Finland has shown some good results. I would say that the main thing has been the systemic change, which has meant converting the shelter system so that housing is based on helping homelessness out of homelessness means providing permanent housing with your own rental contract. There has been national programs, state funding, very broad partnership, very concrete plans aiming to end homelessness. This focus on ending homelessness has been I think that the core of all these programs. And it also means that there are a lot of housing alternatives. And what we always has to remember that the importance of prevention, and in Finnish case, it has meant building affordable social housing and providing housing benefits so that people in the private housing market also can sustain their housing, and also housing advisors preventing evictions. But most of all, I would say that it has been housing first. In the big meaning, building affordable housing in the last decade, I think that there has been a production of almost maybe 90,000 new affordable social housing apartments. At the same time, there has been at least 5,000, according to some estimates, even 7,000 apartments that has been given to homeless persons. But I would illustrate this more with the next slide, which is about youth housing, because this shows the correlation between providing housing and what happens with youth homelessness. Since 2008, in our national programs, building affordable social housing for young people has been one of the elements of prevention. It has been especially mentioned in these programs. And during this 7-9 year period that I have the figures here, 1,400 new homes for youth were built in these program cities. And at the same time, youth homelessness dropped from over 2,000 to 900 and 850. And actually, the decrease has continued since then. According to the latest figures, we have a little over 500 young homeless persons. And this could be also related to the interesting Eurostat statistics, which shows at what age do Europeans leave parental home. In Finland, the age is actually the lowest, 21. Euro average is 25. And to all our surprise, it's not Mamma Mia Italy that's leading. In Italy and Spain, it's 30 years, but it's in Serbia and Croatia, it's even 32 years. So I suppose that these things providing affordable housing for young people is also explaining these differences between different countries. The next slide, please. During all this time that we have been implementing what we have been calling the Finnish Housing First, there has been a constant critics on I would say that these three themes, especially in the early times when we were converting the shelters and hostels into supported housing, we often heard somebody saying that it's only congregated housing. Well, in my opinion, we had congregated housing in 1980s when we had some new units in Helsinki where former homeless persons were living in the same apartment, so that everybody had their own room, and then they had common facilities, kitchen and living room. So in my opinion, that's congregated housing. But if the alleged crime here is that we have housing units where a former homeless person has as his neighbor a former homeless person, so then I can raise my hand and say that guilty as charged. And we have these units that have replaced the existing shelters and hostels. And in the ideal world, of course, we would have made some of them much smaller than they are. But that was the reality at the moment, and we wanted to get results in reducing homelessness. The other one is that it's not housing first, and well, this is maybe a little misplaced criticism because we never aimed to be an implementation of the original Housing First Pathways model. And actually, I would say that I'm happy that we didn't follow the fidelity model. And the last one, the big criticism has been that they don't have immigrants. Well, we have had our own share of immigrants, of course, not in the numbers that in many European countries, but that since 2008, the number of homeless immigrants started to rise until 2015 when it started to decrease again. And at the moment, it looks that the number of homeless immigrants is again a little bit rising. It's now 24% of all homeless persons in Finland. And of course, we have the same issues with paperless people as every other country. But I think that if we move to the next slide, this criticism that we have faced is nothing compared to the self-criticism that we have had during these years. And I think that the Finns are known that we are very self-critical, and I would say that the main criticism that we have got especially from frontline workers is the lack of support, especially specialist services, meaning specialists in mental health care and substance abuse treatment. And this lack, this is at the moment, this is very, very crucial because it affects both homeless people and it also affects the general public, which also increases the risk of new homelessness. And this is because of there's a lack of funding for the services, especially in the new welfare counties that are responsible for social and health services, and also lack of trained personnel. These two elements are the reason behind this lack. But there's also another side of this coin, which is the accessibility of the services. And for that, there has been quite interesting new developments in many cities where they have developed moving multi-professional teams to to get people connected to the right services. And I would also like to mention one special Finnish element, the character trait of Finnish men. You know that we don't speak much, but also the Finnish men are known that they go to a doctor only in the last instance when they have a broken leg or something similar. So my question is that we face the same phenomena with support services. Why would a Finnish man go to a social worker to discuss his problems? That's not an easy thing to happen. So that also has an effect on the use of the available support services. And of course, that's a question of professionalism for people working in the support services to find the right ways to provide the support. And for that purpose, also the more intensive support that's available in the supported housing units has been important. Okay, next slide, please. But if I should name one biggest problem, I would say that it's our present government. I think that my colleagues in the panel discussion will agree with me. The government has been very busy with their austerity measures, cuts in the basic social security, welfare and housing benefits, cuts in the grants for NGOs, inadequate funding of welfare counties providing support, even abolishing of the state's housing fund, moving it part of the state budget, and the ARA, the Development and Finance Center of Housing. And they have a very strong belief in relying on free market housing in the future, solving all these issues. But what's curious is that they still have a program to end long-term homelessness by 2027, and they even have some money to be used for this purpose, which is exceptional in this government's program. But in my opinion, it looks like the government is falling once again in the typical Finnish trap of bureaucratic self-deceit. They have this money, 10 million euros for homelessness program, but what I heard from the Ministry of Social Welfare and Health, you can't get money to do what needs to be done. You can get money to develop something that needs to be done if only there was money to do what needs to be done. I hope I was clear enough. But I trust that people in the sector have the cleverness to wrap their money needs in the disguise of development. So there is some money, but I don't think that it compensates the cuts that the government has made. And then the next one. There's an interesting thing. This slide was provided for me by Jarmo Linden from ARA. And the government program says that as a rule, high quality and reasonably priced housing will be promoted through non-subsidized house building. But it looks like at the moment that the reality is showing a middle finger to our government, because as you can see from the figures, last year and this year, there has been much more new building that's this affordable social housing might be only temporary, so that there will be still hope for the continuation of the decreasing of homelessness in the next years. We only have 2.5 years for the next election. That's an important timeline for us. The other reason that I have still some hope is presented in the next slide. it is what we have been developing with a big group of experts in Finland in recent years, what we have been calling Housing First 2.0, and especially the multi-professional mobile support teams that have been developed, which has proved out to be a very cost-effective way to provide support for those people that you don't normally get in touch with. These two things that we still have increase in affordable social housing and this kind of development that's been done by professionals. These are the hopeful signs, although we know that evictions are at the moment in rise, but still these are elements that could also make a more brighter future possible. And then if I think what we have learned during these years, I think that we have learned some important things that are related to Housing First. And if you put the next slide. I know that I'm not making many new friends with this, what I'm going to say, but anyway, I will say it. Recently I heard some Chamberis saying that Ireland is one of the best national implementations of Housing First. And this left me quite speechless. And although I have great respect for Sam Chamberis and his work, I think that I can't keep quiet anymore because I even see an ethical issue here. I was in Ireland a couple of weeks ago and learned that in Ireland there are 14,000 homeless persons, excluding rough sleepers. And during the time, actually, that Housing First, the pathways, the original fidelity model has been implemented, homelessness has been going up all the time. First fidelity model and ending homelessness, it has only been negative. Earlier, I have said sometimes that very gently tried to point out the risk of Housing First becoming a part of managing homelessness, but actually it has already been realized in many countries. And I think that we are facing an even more serious question. Implementing the fidelity model together with temporary accommodation, is it becoming an impediment in ending homelessness? I tried to find a more nicer word instead of barrier or obstacle. Is Housing First pathways model actually a more costly art for art's sake for professional? Has this model, when it has been implemented, actually left most of the homeless people in distress in the no man's lands of homelessness? Well, the Finnish model has not been this model, and I'm happy for that because with all its faults and failures, it still has worked and proved quite significant results. And maybe even the Finnish model, as it has been named, Housing First, has given some marketing help for the original model also. Sometimes I regret that we name it Housing First, but at least in the future I will. It may be too late to change the name, but I will use a different typo. And if you are not so, the last slide that I have. Yes, and then there's a slide animation if you press. So in the future, I will type the Finnish Housing First, housing in capital letters. A few years ago, I will finish soon. there was one Finnish officer from a certain ministry. I won't name the person, I know him. He expressed in a European meeting severe criticism of this Finnish model, saying that in practice is not at all what it is said to be. And he did this with all the self-confidence that only a total lack of facts can give. This was told to me by one of the directors of DG Employment when she visited Finland. And she was, first of all, amazed when she saw in practice how the system works in Finland. And she said to me, if you have problems, what hope does the rest of Europe have? I want to end by quoting a couple of my Finnish colleagues, Veera Niemi and Elisabetta Leni, when they in their recent blog nicely expressed the actual key point. Housing is the answer, but what was the question? And I will continue by saying that, was it maybe implementing housing first? Was it ending homelessness? Or was it even alleviating poverty? Or was it all these together? Thank you. I will stop now.
Thank you very much. We said it was going to be thought-provoking, and I think it was, so thank you for that. Ruth, if you want to take the floor.
Thank you, Anu. Okay, and thank you very much, Juha. It was certainly thought-provoking. And yeah, just a big thank you for being so honest and reflective, because I think one of the problems with European cooperation is that we get into a kind of show and tell mode where we present good practices as models to copy. And I think we can actually learn much more and have a much more productive European cooperation if we're also upfront and honest about limitations and challenges and kind of reflective practice. So that was really great. And thank you very much for that. We're now going to have a panel discussion. So Juha is going to be joined by Maria Ohisalo. Oh, I hope, Maria, you are with us. Yes, hello. Maria is an MEP for the Green Group in the European Parliament from Finland. She is the former Minister of the Interior and also Minister of the Environment, which includes housing in Finland. And so she's very expert on homelessness and has worked very extensively on the issue. We're also joined by Teija Ojankoski, who is the CEO of the Y Foundation, a very, very important organization delivering housing first in Finland, and Mikko Aaltonen, who is from the city of Tampere and also represents the Committee of the Regions. And we are going to dig into the successes, limitations and challenges of the Finnish approach to ending homelessness, kind of building on what Juha presented in his presentation. So to kick us off, I'd like to invite Mikko to share a few words on, I think we have a tendency to talk about the Finnish model as if it was something completely universal, but you bringing a perspective from local government. And I think it would be interesting if you could tell us something about how the implementation of public policies to combat homelessness in Finland looks different in different places.
Thank you, Ruth, and thanks once again for the invitation to this webinar. As we all know that the homelessness is a multidimensional problem, and this means that these different dimensions affect in some cases very differently in different cities and different areas and regions. In Europe, we have had already, and here in EPOCH practice, we have had already a discussion on rural homelessness also, and that's an important topic and an issue. Unfortunately, in Finland, we don't know much about the rural homelessness in Finland, and that's why I kind of leave it out of my comments, because there's not too many information on that. I think that the rural areas, the homelessness is, there's not too many homeless people in the rural areas, but for sure some of them might be living in very vulnerable conditions. So it's a problem also in Finland, I guess. But the main problem of homelessness is concentrated to big cities, mainly to Helsinki and capital city area, to Tampere and Turku, which are the three biggest urban areas in Finland. And the differences come from many directions. One of the main factor is the amount of inhabitants, how big the city or the urban area is, and how fast it is growing, or if it's decreasing. That affects very much. And then it's also the housing market. What is the situation on the housing market? How much there's a public production of housing, and how much there is private production on housing. And of course, there's a different kind of services, how well they are provided. Now the social and healthcare services are provided by the welfare counties, and the counties are funded directly by the government. So the government funding is a big issue, how the welfare counties can provide the services. And of course, the differences between counties and their organizations, how they prioritize different kind of fields and services. And when it comes to the housing market, the public production of affordable social housing has been a crucial factor when it comes to the reduction of homelessness in Finland. And that's kind of our kind of, how do you say, the foundation of the success, I guess, that for decades there has been a lot of affordable social housing available, and people could have lived there rather easily. And this has been true in many of the most of the cities for many decades. And that has led to a situation where there's usually homes and houses available, but the differences there are differences among the cities. For example, I know that in Helsinki, which has been growing rapidly for the last 50 years or already 60 years, there's a lack of ground or the building sites. So in Finland, the cities and the local and regional administration has the ability or power to how do you say, allow the kind of give out the construction sites and make decisions on the urban planning. So the cities can, in this case, make decisions where the social and affordable housing is built and how much it is built. And in many cases, the cities own the organizations, often the companies who are actually building and owning the social and affordable housing. But if there are not any more available sites, then the problem will become even greater. And this has been, I guess, a problem mainly in the capital city area. It is also a problem nowadays in Tampere, in my city, but our city hasn't been growing that fast before the last 10 years. So we still have available sites. So this is one of the kind of issues that limits the abilities or the possibilities of the local and regional authorities. And of course, there's the population, which kind of people are living in which city, what is their income, what is the situation with the employment, and so on. So many issues that partly can be affected by the local and regional authorities, national government, and so on. But some of them that are not easy to control or kind of moving slowly among many years and developing very slowly. And kind of to conclude, there's disparities and problems, but I think that what Juha mentioned at the end, that the national support on the work on homelessness and work on the social and affordable housing, the main contributor in many cases have been support from the national government. And now we see the problem in Finland that it's kind of disappearing or getting lower and lower all the time. And as a local decision maker, I'm really worried about the situation in Finland in whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mikko. Yeah, I think the importance of the housing market to whether or not you can really scale up housing first is a really critical point from the discussion. And I think Juha's presentation, made crystal clear that Finland has been able to do housing first at scale because of its social housing system, and the fact that that seems to be under pressure / threat going forward is going to make it really challenging potentially to maintain that kind of progress. And I think that's perhaps even more important than whether the housing first that is happening in a given place is pathways housing first or not pathways housing first. It's just a question of scale. But I would like to give the floor now to Teija. So we heard from Juha that the context for the fight against homelessness is changing quite a lot in Finland at the moment. And I'd like you to tell us a little bit about how that looks from Y Foundation's perspective, and how do you adapt to those challenges, and what adaptations will be necessary.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And thank you for the Juha and Mikko for the presentations. The situation, as Juha described, it's quite challenging because the government has made big changes for the politics that we relied on decades, many decades. And when they suddenly cut the grants for building state-subsidized homes and the benefits for people to pay the basic costs of everyday life. So at the same time, when there's inflation, the prices are going up all the time and so on, the living costs have risen a lot. The risk for more people to become homeless in Finland has risen a lot. And that challenges both the organizations and the people. Finland has practically ended the homelessness due to the poverty. And that's what we can be proud of. We have created a system, that a state-subsidized system to build state-subsidized homes. We never stop it like they did it in UK or in Canada, in many countries, and that has paid off. It has shown that it has been a good investment, and it has also prevented the homelessness question, and also for people experiencing homelessness to face more severe situation. But now, because of the government decisions, we are now in turning point, as we have heard today. And for NGOs, as a Y Foundation provides homes, we are the 4th largest landlord in Finland, and we are providing homes for people with low incomes and people experiencing homelessness. And then there are many other organizations, many other NGOs who mostly provide services for people and low threshold services. And now if we because there has been now a Social Reform Act and new welfare counties who don't take care of every services and don't provide low threshold services. Now, because the state is also cutting grants from the NGOs, the possibility to provide low threshold services for people who are not capable to take care very well of themselves. They need those low threshold services, and NGOs are those ones who provides them. And now the ability to provide those services is, I think it's getting worse because the state is cutting the funding for those organizations. And I think that is one part of that. There is that states decisions, and then after that, the effects faces us who provide homes and how people can afford them, because there's also the benefit cuts in social benefits, and the organizations are not able to provide anymore as much services as they have done. And the NGOs have been a crucial part of this Finnish housing first and homelessness work field. Without NGOs, we couldn't have managed so well here in Finland, because the public sector don't provide that kind of specialized services as those NGOs do. And there are many experts in those organizations. So now what we are a little bit afraid of is that we will face next year the time those have to cut the costs. NGOs have to cut the costs. That means they have to cut the services, what they provide. They also have to fire people because they can't afford any more stuff so much they have done. But because we cooperate all the time, now sometimes we have a pessimistic feelings, but we try to find new ways to help each other, to find the ways to help the people who need us. And also we are doing quite a lot of advocacy work to try to get the politicians understand what they are what they are doing. But what is sad is that we somehow the new government has lost the decade-long tradition to negotiate and see the overall picture, that how the thousands things are gathering together and creating the good system. There's too much ideology, not enough studies, and there's no studies around the world that shows that the homelessness and affordability is solvable only by free market. And that's what in Finland we have forgotten. And if I think about what's now going on in Europe, in many countries, in politics, the affordability and the homelessness is quite high on the topics. And they are coming to Finland to see and find examples. What might be the ways? What are the examples they could try to create in their context? We have shown that we have managed to almost solve the problem. We have created the way, most effective way in the world. But as I said, and as the previous the Juha and Mikko said, that we are now facing hard times, but we don't give up. We try to do the work, and the government will change one time, and hopefully the studies and the knowledge and the practices we have created that are effective, hopefully we try to change a little bit the way we are now going on. We understand, all the NGOs, Y funders, we all understand that there is an economical crisis in Finland. But to make the decisions and all the efforts only to that the most vulnerable people will face. So quickly, that's not the right way to do the changes, and that's what we try to convince them that let's negotiate more and let's try to find the wisest conclusions and wisest way to go forward. So maybe this is now. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think everyone can appreciate the feeling of tough times, and maybe a bit difficult to feel very hopeful when the system underpinning such good work is being threatened. On the other hand, I think you're right that there's a huge capacity in the system in Finland that can continue to do good things even in tough times. And perhaps many of the people who've been looking to Finland as an example were looking from places where times were already pretty tough from a housing system and a welfare system perspective, and they still felt that there was something they could take away. I'm going to give the floor now to Maria Ohisalo, and as we're running a little bit behind, I think I might ask you to answer two questions in one, and they are, what's the main lesson perhaps that you think other countries should still learn from Finland, and when it comes to the European level, what do you think the European Union should be doing to help make further progress in the fight against homelessness?
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you very much, Ruth, for the invitation, and thank you for the presentations, Juha, Mikko, Teija. So some of the points that were already made here, I'm going to repeat, but I think because I know the actors on the field, and we all share the lessons we've learned, and we want to stress these in order to share the best practices in the European Union level. So the biggest success, I think, lies first of all in the cross-party support aspect. So that from right to left, from liberals to conservatives, from all the parties in the government, in the parliament, we've had the consensus that we want to get rid of homelessness. And maybe one big question that we also should do in the European Union scale, in the European Parliament, and when we talk about EPOCH practices and work, is that all of the groups, political groups and parties should ask, what's in it for me? In the sense that I feel that in Finland, all of the parties and groups have felt that it's something that we want to do because there's something for us. Okay, let's say for some parties, it could mean that it's the human rights aspect. So offering a home, first of all, giving the housing first, that's a human rights question. For some, it might have been a question about security. Let's say you have less homelessness. It might mean you have less of criminality. For example, there are some interlinkages. We know if people are not doing well in their lives, the risks for crimes and all of that will, of course, also increase. And it is also an economical question. We have had studies done on the fact that housing first actually reduces the costs of the whole, let's say, the whole healthcare system, social and healthcare services. So if you don't have a person on the streets for a long time taking into social and healthcare services and so on, and if there's not a, let's say, a revolving door aspect all the time, so a person gets a home, gets out, gets a home again, that's actually really costly. So we need to get rid of the costs also. So maybe some of the parties have also thought that this is an economical question also. Let's do it. So what's in it for all of the parties, for all of the actors? We should have the whole of a society, whole of a government approach into this. And what was also mentioned here, I think is very important, that this is not only about building new affordable housing. It's not only about the houses itself, it's also about the services, also about all of the support you can give to the people, as was mentioned here. And there's also been studies made on the housing counseling, or let's say housing advising. So when we, for example, in Helsinki, the capital, offered more housing counseling or advising for people, it has meant a decrease in the evictions. And now we actually see again an increase in the evictions, and we might see, as many of the speakers have already said, an increase in homelessness for the first time in a long time. So the whole of the government, the whole of society approach, and when it comes to the European Union level, I think one big question is often asked whether the EU has any competencies, whether there is any legal base to do anything on social political issues, on housing, on homelessness. But I think there is quite a lot. It has been proved already during the previous mandate in the European Parliament. There was a lot of things done on this sector, and I really think, and I urge us all MEPs to continue the work. Let's say, if we would have together an idea, when the Commission President von der Leyen has now said that this is actually matter of, that housing is a European matter. We have now Commissioner von der Leyen saying this, so maybe we should also make plans according to this. Maybe we should also dedicate ourselves to not just say that we will fix it in 5 years, but we will fix it in 10 years. We will eradicate homelessness by 2030 if we really want to, because during the past mandate it was said together in the EP that we can do it. And if there are no goals, also really ambitious goals, then we will not aim as high as we should. And so we can't do it in one mandate, but let's put a good big scope there. And then the big thing that was said, obviously, if we want us to succeed, we need to say that there should be the big change in mindsets, that housing first is really a principle that can alleviate the problem, can solve the whole problem. And actually now when we are hearing the commissioner candidates or the ones who are trying to become commissioners and the European Parliament is questioning them, we are going to ask about housing first. And I've already talked with two of the key commissioners, Roxana Minzatu and Dan Jørgensen. Dan Jørgensen will be if he gets through, he will be the commissioner for energy and housing. And I've already lifted up these success stories from the field, and I see that, for example, in EMPOL committee where I work, also all of the coordinators have quite a good understanding. So from different groups, the responsible people have quite good understanding what we should be doing, and we will be pushing for the commissioners. And I also urge everybody in this field to now give a lot of good advice, give a lot of concrete tools for the commissioner designates, because they really need us. They are willing to listen to the society, and they want to make the best programs possible in order for them to also succeed in their work. So I think there are elements for success, and let's say one aspect that is actually lacking in the European Union level discussion is the financialization of housing, so that we see housing more and more just as an asset. It's not about human rights, and this is what we should be changing. We see more and more countries having a huge amount of their housing market filled with international institutionalized investors who are actually making the prices of housing higher and higher all the time. So the financialization of housing is something that we should be tackling together in the European Union level. And there has been studies made on this topic, and I really think that the Commission should now also push for that direction. It could mean, let's say, European Investment Bank, or what all kinds of institutions we have on the European Union level, that in their work they should also be talking about social conditionalities, so that there would be a framework that they would also have the understanding of how effective housing first principle can actually be. Top-ups we would need, for example, for EU programs such as, let's say, cohesion funds. There has already been talks from the von der Leyen side that cohesion funds would be used more and more for affordable housing. And also the state aid should be more available for affordable housing. There's been problems in some countries on this, and that should be changed. And then, for example, Invest EU program, what can we do there on sustainable and affordable housing? And then also on the next, or this starting Commission term, they will also release a first ever European anti-poverty strategy. And there will be a strategy for affordable housing. So these frameworks should encompass, they should also have housing first principle inside them, and the work should all the time be going, all of these strategies should talk to each other. We in the field, we who are into the topic and want to really eradicate poverty and homelessness, we should be working towards the same goal. And this means also, just to maybe touch upon a bit on the EPOCH work, what I've been saying about why it has been so important that all of the parties and groups have been involved. I think we should do the same in the European Union level. So from all of the different parties, there should be, let's say, at least those gatekeepers or those who have been working on the topic who should be active in the EPOCH work also. So let's not just say that it's maybe one person from the whole European Parliament. We are over 700 MEPs, but we should have people from each group who are dedicated into this work. I think this could make a success. And also then to talk from these different perspectives. For some, it could be the economical reasons. For some, it might be the human rights reasons. And so maybe just to end, as Juha did, also, I would say that putting housing first principle into all of the work we're doing always and everywhere, that is the key, also in the European Union level. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I want to have as much time as possible for the questions and discussion. So I just would like to open the floor and invite you, if you have a question for any of the speakers or a remark that you'd like to share, to raise your hand or to put things in the chat if you'd rather do it that way.
Hi, Ruth, could I ask a question?
Yes, please.
Hi, it's Ewan from Depot International. Could I just understand the point, or could I get a bit more explanation on the point Juha was making about the difference between the Finnish model and the Fidelity Pathways model? What exactly are we talking about, and why? How is it distinguished? And what's the kind of case for them for that model, if you know what I mean?
So if I try to answer, I think that there are two key differences with the Fidelity model and the Finnish model. One is about the housing solutions. So we are not relying only on scattered housing for various reasons. It would take a little bit longer time to explain different reasons for that, but we have realized at least that there are very different needs for homeless persons, and some need that kind of intensive support that's not so easy to arrange in scattered housing. And also, I think that even in implementing the original model in many places, people have realized the risk of loneliness and isolation that people may experience in scattered housing. And the other one is the way how the support is organized, because in our system we are relying very much on the existing social and health services. So we have this principle of normality, that everybody can use the services that are meant for the general public. But of course, there's also special support available for homeless persons. But we don't have this kind of ACT teams like in the original model, which I think it's a very costly solution. And when we were discussing it this once, I said that if we would have relied on that ACT system, we would have run out of psychiatrists in Finland, because it requires a certain amount of psychiatrists in these teams. These are maybe the big differences, and also the fact that we have a rental contract. The tenant has a normal legal contract like everybody else in Finland, and he's supposed to pay the rent also. So he has the same rights and same obligations, and if he doesn't have enough income to pay the rent, he can get the general housing benefit as everybody else in the same situation. So I think that the housing solutions and also the support system are different. And of course, the fact that our Housing First is not meant only for people, long-term homeless people. I think that's an important thing. Otherwise, we end up in a system where we wait long enough that people get enough problems to be eligible for Housing First. And that's not the way how we see it. So we have to provide housing always. That's the only common thing for everybody who are in homelessness. But then the support varies very much depending on the personal needs. And also you can access the need of support actually only after somebody has got a home of their own. So maybe these are the main differences.
Thanks, Juha. So there are a few more questions coming in. Enrique, you had a similar question in the chat. I wonder, did that answer your question, or is there more to add?
Thank you.
Okay. And I think I would maybe just make a comment in relation to that question. And I think it's a real problem for the goal of ending homelessness and the goal of scaling up housing first as a way of contributing to that goal. If we, like in most of the world, and certainly in Europe, housing first is like maximum about 10% of the homeless service system. And it's a big mistake to spend all of our time looking at that 10% and assessing how perfect or not it is, when the vast majority of people who are not able to access or keep housing with or without support services, depending on their needs, are totally outside and in another system. And in most countries, homelessness is increasing. So I think for me, one of the most important lessons from Finland is around the scale, and comparing different types of housing first is less interesting to me than understanding how they reached that type of scale, so that most people who, for most people, homelessness would either be prevented or be very short. But I'm going to give the floor to Julia, who raised her hand for a question, and then maybe just plant the idea in the speakers' minds that there is another question in the chat on eviction. Joanna is asking whether you could tell us a little bit more about the rising rates of evictions and how public authorities are responding to that, if at all. So first, I'll give the floor to Julia, and then maybe we can come to evictions.
Yes, hello. I'm really happy to be able to ask the question, and I wanted to ask the question to Juha. So Juha, I think I am your friend. We had the possibility to cooperate on one pilot Housing First program in Poland, and I absolutely agree that adaptations are useful, and full fidelity is not the best solution. So I agree that on systemic level, it's important to advocate for what ends homelessness and leave local stakeholders, local experts decision which tools would be the most effective. However, I think that people still need some guidelines like Housing First values. On program level, I find fidelity scale and all the machinery for measuring fidelity, I find it really useful, like a tool for educating the staff. So when I do fidelity consultation for the teams that I work with, I use very strict measures so that it would be comparable with American measurements, but it's only for the teams to learn. And the question, Ruth, I can see you, the question, you mentioned you would change the name of the Finnish model into capital letters, housing, and then first. So I wanted to ask you, what is the role in changing, or how much is it a core of Housing First as well, leaving the decision to, so I mean, not the housing, not the infrastructure, but the way the social workers, the professionals support people, how they interact, how much space they give for people's choices and decisions, how much they work on harm reduction. I find it really a core for what we need to change. So I'm wondering, what is its place in your capital Housing First idea?
Well, to answer you briefly, I think that we will never end homelessness unless we see ending homelessness as part of housing policy. So for me, it has become obvious that, first of all, it is a housing policy issue, and it's secondary a social policy issue. Of course, when we want to end homelessness totally, we have much room and need also for very, very specific support and social policy measures. But the main thing is whatever kind of housing first we are having, we don't have it if we don't have the housing. So that's only to highlight the importance of housing in this context. And I'm a little bit afraid of implementing the very strict fidelity model because I see that it's a little bit costly way also. So you can have it for a very small group, but it leaves out so much of homeless people that for me we need an ethical justification how we deal with different groups of homelessness, and we have to provide housing for all groups of homelessness. That was only to make it. I think we need a more flexibility and more innovative approaches, and I totally agree with you that it's for local stakeholders to see what are the actual needs and what are the ways how we end homelessness in our local context. So that's probably the main message. If you need and you can use fidelity measures, fidelity scales, etc. So that's totally fine, but that's not really the way we are doing it in Finland.
So you would agree? Would you agree with me that using fidelity measures is a good way of educating people, not assessing programs and not showing the goals of the programs? It's something that you can use to educate professionals how to work with people.
If you think so, in your Polish context, that's totally fine for me. And of course, the basic philosophy behind our approach and the housing first fidelity model, it's totally the same. It's the question about human value and providing decent life for people. It's not a question about the values, actually. The difference is not in the values and in the basic philosophy. But for us, it's more a philosophy. If you want to make structural changes, you must do another things than just implementing a very strict model.
Thank you. I think it would be great if any of the panelists would like to react to the question on evictions. Maria, I see your hand is raised. So.
Yes, thank you. I can start and maybe you can, the others can continue. First of all, it's the cost of living crisis that has been going through the whole Europe. And it didn't start now while the new government started. It did start before. So actually the evictions have been going a bit up already before this government started. But when you put on top of the cost of living crisis, the fact that you are cutting from social security, you are cutting from housing counseling, which I just said that we have proved to decrease the amount of evictions. Because it's actually during my Minister of Housing period, I gave a legislation on housing counseling and we put more money onto it and now it was cut down. Not all of it, but parts of it. And so the biggest reason is the unpaid rents. Obviously, some people also have, let's say, substance abuse problems and all of that, and they are not getting enough social services, healthcare services to those problems. But the biggest reason seems to be the unpaid rents. And then it comes together with all of this cost of living crisis when the government doesn't actually work in accordance to that, but just does the opposite. And there has also been now changes in social security so that you are advised to move into a smaller apartment or otherwise you will lose some parts of your social security. And this means for many that there might not be houses enough, there might not be small homes, and all of these changes together will do the rise in evictions.
Okay, thank you, Mikko. Did you want to add something on this question?
Yes, the evictions in my city, Tampere, have been increasing 44% this year. And it's an alarming number, and we are reacting right now with the increasing of the housing counseling, and that's the first thing we are going to do because we cannot affect the benefits coming from the national government or the building of new buildings, of the new apartments, it's not possible in a short term. So that's one of the first things that we are doing, but it's not public yet because the budget for the next year is not published. So don't tell our mayor that you know it already. Thank you.
If I may add something, I think that it's also important to understand that evictions doesn't necessarily lead into homelessness also. In Finland, especially if there are families with children involved, in most cases there are other solutions that will be found also. But of course, it's alarming that evictions are on the rise, and the main reason is rental areas. But if the background is, for example, some disturbances, that's normally takes a longer period in the legal process. For that reason, most evictions are based on rental areas.
And maybe I can add some other thing, as has mentioned about families with children. In Finland, we have the Child Protecting Act that guarantees that there is never children on the streets. And I think on a European level, that's very important part of the politics and very successful way to prevent the inherited way, the experiences as a child will experience homelessness, and that's very important part of the whole system. And when we talk about evictions, those families with children will always be helped.
Okay, thank you very much. There are a couple of questions in the chat. Maybe I can just encourage speakers, if you see a question in the chat that you think you can reply to directly through the chat, don't hesitate to do that. And perhaps I'll give the floor to Solène, who has been waiting.
Thank you. I'm Solène, I'm from universities. I hear from a lot of cities challenges related to people being taken up in housing first or housing-led services and relying on intense form of support, and that being quite successful. But then a lot of municipalities are struggling to support the amount of people that they need to support, and people are not necessarily moving on to lower forms of support. So I'm wondering if that's the case in Finland, if you see a good rate of people maybe needing less intensive support, and if not, how do you manage the scale of the people who are being supported, and to avoid like a constant inflation of services and of the funding required, and if that's maybe different funding streams. So if people are in a stable form of housing but with a lot of support, is that the same funding stream as supporting homeless people, and are there differences in this?
Well, I think that in the Finnish system, when we don't have this kind of wraparound support for individual homeless persons, the housing is separated from support. The risk for people getting too much support is not an issue. The idea is that you don't have to move from your home because you have a rental contract, even though you have a lower support needs, and this is the support is provided by the welfare counties nowadays. Earlier it was by the municipality, so that's the main funding stream for the support. But of course, it's there are sometimes issues because support is also provided by NGOs, and the welfare counties nowadays, early municipalities, have their procurement processes where they define what kind of support they want to buy from the NGOs. So there can be issues that the level of support is not adequate to the customers' needs also. But the more you have flexibility in the system, the more easy this kind of questions are of course also. Not an easy question to answer anyway.
Thank you. And then in the chat, we had two questions. One was about to what extent the private rental sector in the housing market is involved in providing the housing for people housed through Housing First in Finland. And another one saying, would it be fair to describe the Finnish approach more as housing-led than Housing First? So again, maybe I can invite all of the panelists to jump in on those two questions if they wish to. Or any of the panelists, rather than all. We don't have time for all.
Well, maybe I could start. If somebody wants to call this model housing-led, by all means, the name doesn't matter. The thing that matters is what we are doing, and the role of the private sector. It's quite minimal in providing the housing for people coming out of homelessness. There are different sources, municipal housing companies, NGOs, the biggest one, of course, Y Foundation, but some other ones also who have been buying apartments from the private market, and they have been kind of turned into social housing rented for homeless persons, or municipalities earlier to be provided for homeless persons. So the role of private sector is very small. We couldn't rely on that.
Yeah. Okay, thanks. Mary, did you have a hand raised?
I did, but it was sort of. I'm sorry. I was sort of circling back, so maybe it's not on topic. But, Juha, when you listed the criticisms that you faced on Housing First, I guess I'm wondering about the, and I mean, I couldn't agree with your analysis of Ireland more, sadly, but and I have my own part to play in that. But I suppose I was wondering about one of the big criticisms we face is when we're trying to increase lettings, social housing lettings, we face tremendous pushback in relation to the fear that we will somehow incentivize presentations to homeless. And you didn't name that as something that you faced in Finland, and also a fear that we would, another rarely spoken out loud fear, which is because we've had so much EU migrant homelessness in the last few years, that we would be prioritizing new arriving families over families who've been on the housing waiting list for many, many years. So they're the kind of, you didn't say them, you didn't seem to face those criticisms, but they're things that we certainly are facing as a bloc, because I think you're absolutely right. We have a small little Housing First piece over here, and we're very proud of ourselves, and we're completely missing the boat with our 500 versus 14,000. There's no, there is absolutely no comparison. But yeah, anyway, I was curious about that.
Yeah, well, I think that the main thing is that in recent years, especially in the big city areas like in Helsinki, there has been quite much affordable social housing production that's meant for the general public. So, for example, there has been no income caps earlier. Now the government has implemented that kind of thing also. So this kind of discussion doesn't arise when there's simply enough affordable social housing available. I think that's probably the main difference also compared to the situation in Ireland.
Okay. I'm afraid that we're running out of time. So I would like to say just a huge thank you to both the speakers and the participants. I found it to be a really rich and interesting discussion, and probably could have carried it on for quite a lot longer. But I think I would like to a lot of difficult challenges were raised in the seminar, and I think it's very clear that Finland is in a difficult moment where many of the elements that have made their success with Housing First and ending homelessness possible, in terms of housing benefit, in terms of subsidized social housing, are kind of under threat in terms of the funding for the support services. And that's really challenging. I hope that the European cooperation on homelessness and this shared goal of ending homelessness and this commitment to evidence-based practice can help people who are working to end homelessness even in tough times. And I think, you know, if the European Platform on Combating Homelessness and if learning from each other can do that, then that's a huge added value. I would hate for people to go away from the seminar with a feeling that somehow, I don't know, it's not real housing first, and I think whatever is happening currently, Finland has been a really inspiring example of turning the tide on homelessness. And we're in a context in most European countries where homelessness is rising, and where it's rising in some countries increasingly quickly. And turning the tide is the right objective. And we should, even faced with a political context where it's hard to make the case for evidence, we should hold on to the evidence and we should learn from one another. And I think that there is a middle ground between Housing First is a strict operational model that everyone has to follow, and Housing First is anything and everything that you want it to be. Neither of those things are true. We've done a lot of work to develop a shared understanding of Housing First in the European Union. We have defined these core principles. The work of the Housing First Hub, I think, has contributed, and the European Platform on Combating Homelessness and this emerging European agenda on homelessness should build on all of that. And we should go for the middle ground and certainly not, I think, draw the conclusion that Housing First is anything and everything you want it to be, whilst at the same time, of course, it isn't a one size fits all, and it isn't a magic solution to everything. So I'm going to close the seminar there. I think I would like to take the opportunity to say that our next webinar will be about criminalization of homelessness, with the participation of the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to housing. The date will be coming out soon, so keep an eye on our comms channels for that. And yeah, just thank you all again, and look forward to the next exchange.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you. Bye bye.